up on the hill, I hear the chirping of a lonely whippoorwill. It seems that everything's shining just for you.
You know, the last review I did on this channel for the movie Scarlet Street was a little bit heavy. So this time I'm going to watch something a little lighter. Why not some Roy Rogers? It's a Western with some action, some humor, a little romance, some music. It's got Roy Rogers, Gabby Hayes, and Gail Storm. It's just a feel-good cowboy movie. I'll give a summary and then offer some closing thoughts. So the film opens up with a statement that the story that Jesse James was finally killed by a disloyal member of his gang is well known and believed by many to be factual. But there is another legend, vouched for by many old-timers of Missouri, which goes like this. I love it. And then our story begins. And we have a bunch of farmers in Missouri. They've been given some land that they can work and kind of live on by this railroad company with a guarantee that a little bit later they'll be able to buy it at a low price. But we discover that later on these greedy railroad people actually are going to demand a ton of money that these settlers can't afford. Now, the evil banker guy, Phineas Krager, is played here by actor Pierre Watkin, is behind all of these shenanigans, and he's ripping off these people. So we see that the local court cannot help these settlers. And realizing there aren't many options available, Sheriff Gabby Whitaker, played by my personal hero, Gabby Hayes, sends a note to his friend, Jesse James, played by Roy Rogers himself, and lets him know what's going on. Well, in town, a scruffy-looking stranger appears, and one of the locals runs to get the sheriff, thinking that this guy is Jesse James. But it turns out that the stranger just happens to look very similar to Jesse James, and is actually a different guy named Clint Burns. He's also played by Roy Rogers, but, with a little bit of facial stubble. Sheriff Gabby doesn't believe it, and he orders this guy to come along peacefully and locks him up in jail. Now, meanwhile, someone shows up to help pay for the land of one of the settlers. He uses the name of Carson, but it looks to be the real Jesse James here. The bankers see the money and they trace it to money that was stolen from a train recently, so they figure that it's that pesky Jesse James fellow who's helping out people, fighting the system like a modern-day Robin Hood. Yee-haw!
You know a man named Carson?
Carson? No, I never heard of him.
No? Then maybe you haven't got a deed to this place.
You're darn tootin' I've got a deed. Oh, you don't. That's mine. Sealed and recorded, and I'm hanging on to it.
Now, watch out you don't hang with it. That was bought with stolen money. You know who bought it? Jesse James. Where is he?
We don't know nothing about Jesse James. Now, you get moving, Krager, before I lose my temper.
It sure was good buttermilk. Sort of takes a bad taste out of a man's mouth.
Well, Sheriff Gabby arrives in town with Krager, and Gabby says it's 9 o'clock at night and he's ready for bed. I understand you, Gabby. But the train man wants to go to the bank and check on things, and as they arrive, they discover Jesse James and his gang are there, holding it up. Jesse takes Gabby's gun, and they leave with all the money. Well, Gabby realizes he's locked up the wrong person, so he goes back and releases this guy, Clint Burns, from jail, who seems annoyed, but he heads out on his way. But this Phineas Krager guy stops him with an evil scheme in mind, that this character, Cliff, should pretend to be Jesse James, but also to be a troublemaker and commit some hijinks and tomfoolery in town to sour the name of Jesse James. Because the townfolk, they all see Jesse James as this hero. So this Phineas Krager guy wants to kind of ruin his reputation. So Cliff agrees to go along with this idea. Now, Polly Morgan of the St. Louis Journal arrives in town to interview Krager about what's been going on. She's played by actress Sally Payne. Krager seems annoyed by this brash young woman interfering in his business. So she's there in town with her friend Jane Fillmore, who's played by lovely actress Gail Storm, who has been in a number of reviews I've done on this channel. And they go to meet with Sheriff Gabby, as they want to get the story of Jesse James and what's going on here in town. So they both meet at Gabby's place later for some fried chicken. But that's when the evil, phony Jesse James shows up with his men, and they set fire to the place. But shortly after, the real Jesse James shows up and rescues poor Gabby. Now the ladies are a little confused, but they figure out that it was this Clint fellow that had caused this mischief. Now Jesse tells them not to tell anybody about this just yet, that he has a scheme. So later, the people of town demand justice from the sheriff, that he goes after Jesse James for the troubles that he's been causing. Now Gabby says that he has found out that Jesse James has apparently been shot, and he's hiding out in a shack with most of his gang having abandoned him. So Polly and Jane head out to find him, but that evil Krager sends Cliff and his guys out to find Jesse as well. And what follows is a big ol' shootout, as is to be expected in a Roy Rogers Western like this, and in all the commotion of it, Jesse shoots Clint, then takes his outfit to pretend to be him. You know, Jesse James pretending to be the fake Jesse James to his gang. He then goes to confront Krager, pretending to be Clint, and Krager offers him money to get out of town now that Jesse's gone. But Jesse, pretending to be Clint, says no, he wants to stay in town to do some gambling. However, before he gets to that gambling, he takes a ride, singing to Gail Storm because, well, heck, it's Gail Storm, and she's a cutie.
I told my secret to the stars, all aglow in the evening sky, and all the little stars on high are winking a million eyes.
Krager then sends the character Sloane to go and gamble with Jesse, and to try and frame him as a cheat. But Jesse puts an end to that scheme. Now Krager and Clint's old gang, they're starting to get suspicious that Clint may actually be Jesse James. But what will happen? Will they stop our hero in disguise? Or will Jesse manage to bring down this evil gang of railroad tycoons and ne'er-do-wells? Well, with only a few minutes left in the film, you'll have to see the ending for yourself. Jesse James at Bay was a fun film. It was directed by Joseph Kane and starred Roy Rogers and George Gabby Hayes. And I like the idea of a Western with mistaken lookalikes and doppelgangers. Even if it does seem completely implausible, it's still a lot of fun. You know, I've watched and reviewed some Roy Rogers films before, and it's actually kind of unusual not to see him with Dale Evans or Trigger the Horse. But all the same, he's still very entertaining here, especially playing two different guys. His character sort of has that indestructible Hopalong Cassidy style vibe where no harm can ever really come to him. And, you know, there's something just kind of comforting, I think, in that. I hope to put more on the channel in the future. There's not really much you can give in terms of deep analysis of the film. He's just a really happy cowboy, strolls into town and saves the day. And Gabby Hayes, he's just the greatest. I don't care what he's in. He's always just this grizzly old-timer, and he's just hilarious. It's his look, it's his voice, and how he says things like, "By cracky, I'll do it!" You know, he's generally the staple of a Hopalong Cassidy film, and, you know, I've reviewed a number of those on this channel, so it was actually kind of cool to see him paired with Roy Rogers for a change. You know, it's funny, looking over a listing of roles he's played, you know, his list of characters includes names like Windy, Dusty, Pesky, Grizzly, or just Gabby. But he's a legend. So as mentioned at the beginning, the film opens up with a message that although it was believed that Jesse James was finally killed by a disloyal member of his gang, there's many people in Missouri who think he survived. I mean, I guess it could have happened. You know, I've watched a couple of biographies on Jesse James, and I know he was something of a folk hero and a legend, sort of like a Robin Hood character. But did he actually survive and live on for more adventures? Who knows? But it makes for some fun cinema. Although I really doubt there was a situation where he had a twin duplicate in town, but all the same, I enjoyed the film. You know, watching Roy Rogers, it reminds me of many years ago going to Roy Rogers restaurants. I remember visiting those in the tri-state area when I lived out near Philadelphia. I seem to remember they made a really good roast beef sandwich, but Alas, they don't exist in rural South Florida. But who knows, if I'm ever up in the Philly area, I should stop in again. Anyhow, let me wrap this video up. Is this one in the public domain? I'm not sure. I couldn't really tell from anything I read, but there are a ton of copies of this online. A lot of them are really ratty in quality. I've got a good one listed below. It's also currently available on Prime. So that's my review of Jesse James at Bay from 1941. It's an enjoyable Western with Roy Rogers, Gabby Hayes, and Gail Storm. It's a fun, brief Western adventure, and it's one worth checking out.